sit down now. Thank you for your help today. We had a dozen of those in our first service this morning. We almost had a dozen children. They were all just kind of, it was fun. It was so fun. It was just, there was so much energy there. And just having that much activity. So you can bring her back in. She's doing fine.
She's really not happy.
Okay, well, we'll understand.
We just need to bring May back.
Yeah, good. May's doing fine. They're going to be joining an Orthodox church up there in Portland. So May's going to learn. How to do that. Because the Orthodox church is like formal. It's like liturgy for 3 hours. I don't know how little kids do that, but she's going to learn. Well, have you ever heard of the Jefferson Bible? Anybody heard of the Jefferson Bible? Jefferson Bible was written by Thomas Jefferson. And Thomas Jefferson, founding father, great statesman and scholar, and he was a scientist. If you've been back to what is it? Montecito? What's the name? Monticello. Thank you, Monticello. You know what a scientist? You've been there. It's just amazing the amount of science he conducted. But he saw the Bible through the eyes of a scientist that said if you can't prove it, it's not true. And so he saw the Bible full of all kinds of mythology and inaccuracies and goofy stuff. And he said, there's some good stuff in here, but there's all this other stuff. So he took literally a razor and glue and cut out the passages he liked and cut away the passages he didn't like. He created the Jefferson Bible, which is full of all kinds of practical advice given by Jesus of Nazareth, and devoid of all that mythology, magic stuff, and miracles, and all that stuff he couldn't prove. Now that sounds kind of goofy, but this very week, I was reading a blog about a big pastor in the South, big megachurch pastor, well-respected guy. And he gave a sermon recently, and he said, we as Christians really ought to focus more on the New Testament. And what did he say? Concentrate on the New Testament and the God of love, and unhitch our faith from those parts of Scripture where we see a God full of wrath and justice. In other words, he was kind of cutting and pasting what he saw too was important, and getting rid of things he didn't think were important. And I actually have pastor friends who will not preach on anything but the gospel, because we're Jesus people, not Jewish law people, and so we should always be preaching on the gospel. And then there's actually, this isn't new. There's this theologian, this church leader named Marcion, in the year 144, it was a while ago, who said the same thing. He said, we only need Gospel of Luke and Matthew and a few of the epistles, and everything else we can get rid of. We don't need the Old Testament. We don't need the Jewish Bible. It doesn't offer us anything. Yeah, it was one of the first early heresies of the church that they had to figure out, because it would send them off in a whole different direction. So this whole idea of kind of cutting and pasting is not new, but it has serious ramifications, because once you start doing that, you miss the whole scope of the story. You begin to see God as he is now different than he was back then, whatever back then is. And we begin to miss the whole picture. And we miss one of the important facts about God, in that he is a God who does not change. God doesn't change. We do, or our perception of him does. So I want to take a look at kind of where some of this comes from, and this fact. And I want to take a look at this morning, the book of Job. How many have read the book of Job? Not a long book, so a few exactly. But it's a book that we don't tend to read. We don't have much of it in the church here. We don't unpack it. So I want to look at the book of Job because it tells us, it's a great story. It also tells us some things about who God is, and it's had some troubling pieces of it too. And you can begin to see why people might say, well, I don't like that God, I don't like our God. But let's just look for a minute at the book of Job and recap it. Now, Job is a guy who has the world by the tail. Life is good for Job. He is blameless, he is upright, he has kids, he has houses, he has land, he has a bunch of sheep and camels, and life is good. And God brags to the company of heaven about what a great guy Job is. And there is the problem. Because in jumps Satan, who says, hey, wait a minute, God. Job's not such a great guy devoted to you because he's devoted to you. He's a great guy devoted to you because he has all this stuff. You get rid of this stuff and he'll leave you in a hot second. God says, I'll take you up on that challenge. So, right after that, Satan unleashes these forces on Job, and his entire family, except his wife, is killed. His houses are blown away by tornadoes. His servants are all killed. His camels and sheep are all stolen and killed. He's covered in boils and blisters all over his body, and he is in misery. And even though he's in misery, he still does not renounce God. He just says, God, I think I deserve an explanation for what's going on here. So he starts talking to all his friends, and his friends give him all this, guys, most of it pretty bad. And then God shows up. And God says, what are you talking about? God shows up and says, who is it that darkens the counsel by words without knowledge? Dress like a man and for action, and I will question you, and you will answer me. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Who stretched out a line upon it? Or who laid its cornerstone? Huh? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy, where were you?
I got to go back to mom.
Who shut the sea with its doors when it burst from the womb? Who made the clouds its garment? Where were you? Who set its limits? Who said, you shall come this far and no farther? Were you a part of that conversation? Well, needless to say, Job was a little embarrassed, I think. He had told God he deserved an explanation. And so he just went back to work. But then what did God do? God restored him. Actually, restored him double what he had. So it's got a happy ending. But this does make some questions, doesn't it? Because how is God behaving here as we know him, as we see him? Because God here is, first of all, he's having this wager, he's having this contest with Satan. And the consequences are tough. He allows this terrible evil to fall on his devout follower. And he allows Job to sit in misery for, I don't know how long, for a good long time. I mean, is that a loving God? Because we normally see God as compassionate and caring and loving. And is this loving activity? No, I can see why somebody might say, well, I'm cutting that part of God out of the Bible. And then all the time we talk about how God makes his people a priority. We read that in Scripture, don't we? That he will be with us to the end of the ages, and we are his treasured possessions, and he sent his son to die for us. But when Job says, what's going on? And God describes his creation. He describes the sea. He describes the stars. He doesn't describe man. He doesn't even mention it. So is this God? Does he care about people? We don't see it in his language, do we? And is God even there? I mean, it's 38 chapters of misery for Job before God even shows up. Is God really connected to his people? So this is a different type of God than we tend to see when we read the Gospels. We don't see him portrayed the same way. And I can see there's a case to be made, well, I don't like that God. I like the God of love much better. Who is it that we're seeing in the story of Job? Is this really the nature of God? Who allows Satan to run free and Job to be in misery and seems to be distant and uninterested? But Isaiah writes, and we have to remember this. Isaiah writes, my ways are not your ways. And we cannot understand the mind of God. God is the same today as tomorrow and forever. And even though we don't understand him, he is the same. See, God had this conversation with Satan. And what's Satan saying? He's saying Job's nothing. He doesn't have any faith. He's just enjoying all the things of this earth. And God is standing up for Job saying, no, he is a man of faith. He is my child. He is connected to me. And he loves more than the stuff of this world. And I'm going to prove it to you, Satan. God stands with Job. And then in his darkest, most miserable hour, he gives him strength to continue to have that faith. That's who God was. And that's who God is. Because he stands with us. Even if we are in our miserable hour. Even if we are being attacked by Satan and accused of being nothing more than people of this world that have no faith. God stands with us as well. That is the God we consistently see. One who is with us, one who strengthens our faith. And he's the God who showed Satan that Satan didn't have control of the earth. Satan thought he was, that the stuff of this world gave him control of this world. And Job was just another one of his minions under his control. And God showed him, no. He doesn't actually care about his stuff as much as he cares about his relationship with me. Sorry, Satan. I'm embarrassing you. And God did it 1,000 years later when he sent his son to die and to change everything and to begin the total destruction of Satan. God said, nope, you thought you were in charge of this world and all these people? You're not. I am. God is consistently in this world showing that he is in control. That is the God we consistently see. And look, God looks like he's far away from Job as he's sitting there on his ash pile, commiserating with people. And where is he? Well, when he shows up, he is well aware of Job's problems and his pain. And those are things he knows forever. And he brings words for Job that change Job. The same way he brings words for us that change us. He brought words to Benjamin this morning that baptized him and changed him forever. He brought words to you this morning in forgiveness that changed who you were. God is consistent in his words then and now. He is consistently changing us. But the answer is always, your ways are not his ways. Because we don't always understand what he's doing. But he is always limiting the power of the evil one. He's always understanding our misery and in the middle of it and giving us hope. And he is always present in our lives. When we look at Job, when we look at ancient literature like that, and it looks like God is different, he isn't. We may be uncomfortable with how he's acting. We may not understand it. We may not agree with it. we may want to cut it out, but we can't. Because he is always the same. And he always is involved in our lives and always loving us. And no matter how much we cut out from around the Bible, we can never cut that part out. That part will never change. We cannot cut and paste that way. That is the good news we find throughout the whole story of God in the Old and the New Testament. In Jesus' name, amen.